You and Cheryl?
Yes. Cheryl's over here, I'm over there.
Please join me in lighting the chalice. The words are in your order of service. We light this beacon of hope, sign for quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together.
to this circle of community, come into this sacred space. Be not tentative, bring your whole self, bring the joy that makes your heart sing, bring your kindness and your compassion, bring also your sorrow and your pain, bring your brokenness and your disappointments. Spirit of love and mystery, help us to recognize the spark of the divine that resides inside each of us. May we know the joy of wholeness. May we know the joy of being together. Come. Good morning, everybody. My name is Charlie Tyler. I'm the pastoral minister here at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Low Country. It's my joy and my privilege to serve this congregation as you serve me as we continue to open our hearts towards each other. There is on my immediate left up here a large bouquet of sweetness. This bouquet of sweetness is to be delivered to David and Sarah from a special gnome that wants him to feel special. So David, if you would please. I will let the kindness known determine whether he or she will reveal him or herself. There's some announcements that I want to bring to your attention this morning. Several of them, of course, you see the Pride celebration that continues to go on. June 17th, we will be celebrating down at Tanger Outlet in Hilton Head. You also see that we are working on becoming reclassified as a welcoming congregation. We've got most of the stuff already done. Is that right, Ann? That's what happens when I give her no notice that I'm going to call. We'll talk more. You'll see some of the dates that are coming up for Music on Malfors. Last night ended our last one with Rod McDonald. Did I get his first name right? It was fabulous. You all missed a great concert. I hope that next time he comes back around, we're able to share that heart together. He has a big one. A little bit like Arlo Guthrie meets Bob Dylan kind of thing. That's kind of the way he worked last night. It was great fun. This coming Sunday, Pat Job will be bringing us Delight as an appeal to the air around us. That is going to be a fabulous time. I'm looking very much forward to that. I think that's all the announcements I need to make at the moment. I know that there's a letter that has come to me from Linda Labrera, our treasurer. Dear Linda, on behalf of the Sun City Chimers, I wish to thank you for your generous donation of $100. We will use your donation to purchase more music for our group. We enjoyed playing for your church service. We would love to return at a future date. That's good news. That was a fun time. Let's see. I think that's all the announcements I need to bring to our attention. I do want to take a moment and welcome those of you who are guests and visitors. If this is your first or second time, I would love it if you would feel comfortable to stand where you are and tell us your name and where you're from, because probably somebody else is from that place too. So are there any first or second time visitors that are willing to fess up? No? Oh, yes, ma'am.
I am not a first or second time visitor, but I am a first time since the pandemic. And I am here specifically because I love the speaker that we're having today.
Oh, great. Thank you. Any others? And there's a new qualification. If this is the first time since the pandemic you've been, stand and introduce yourself. No others? Okay. I do want to introduce to you Gwenn and her family. Gwenn is from Pennsylvania, has moved into this area just a few years ago. Her wife Ashley is with her today, and her oldest kid, quote unquote, Sam, is also with us today too. So Gwenn, I'm going to let you have the opening words.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Gwenn. Sorry. I'm very tall. I'm so honored to be here. I appreciate how welcoming you all have been towards me in the past. The author J.R.R. Tolkien once wrote that I have found that it is the small everyday deed of ordinary folks that keeps the darkness at bay, small acts of kindness and love. And so today I'm going to spend some time looking at both the small acts of kindness and love that I've received and the small acts of contempt and cruelty that have shaped the person that I am today. We often focus on the big picture of how we can help the world, but in my experience, it's rarely a big act. It's always 100 small ones. We choose to share our light we choose when to share our light with someone, and we can choose when to leave them in darkness. And so my hope is that we choose to share our light.
And now, would you rise as you are
Yes.
willing and able?
Do what she said.
We didn't rehearse this. Hymn 114, Forward Through the Ages.
This is the time for sharing our joys and concerns. This part of the service will not be live streamed. The way it works is if you have a joy or a concern to share, you come forward, take a stone from the basket, tell us your joy or concern and your name, and then put the stone in the cairn. We ask that you make no announcements during this time and that you make no political statements. You can come forward as you will. joys and concerns that remain in your hearts. And now we'll have our affirmation. If you would turn in your hymnals to number 614. And this is written by, excuse me, a Native American black elk. Then I was standing on the highest mountain of them all, and around beneath me was the whole hoop of the world. And while I stood there, I saw more than I could tell, and I understood more than I saw. For I was seeing in the sacred manner the shape of all things of the Spirit, and the shapes as they must live together like one being. And I saw the sacred hoop of my people with many hoops that make one circle, wide as daylight and starlight, and the center grew a mighty flowering tree to shelter all the children of one mother and one father, and I saw that it was holy. And now it says that Ann Harrison has a story for us. She's here.
So, the UUA is the central organization for the Unitarian Universalist religious movement in the United States. And just a few weeks ago, in response to all of the legislative attacks that have been growing against trans and non-binary kids and the entire LGBTQIA community, the UUA issued a press release, which I would like to share with you this morning. Our Unitarian Universalist Association has responded with clarity, compassion, and courage by saying, these are heartbreaking times. They are also defining times. There's been an onslaught of oppressive laws and policies which are threatening the lives and well-being of our children, young people and adults, our families, and the very fabric of our communities. We are now experiencing the outright political targeting of transgender and non-binary people. And this includes the banning of gender-affirming health care, bans against trans kids playing sports, and laws criminalizing drag. This policy violence and dehumanizing rhetoric creates an environment that can provoke physical violence and further discrimination. We're also witnessing efforts in countless states across the nation to criminalize reproductive health care, comprehensive education about Black history, race, and gender, and numerous issues of human rights. These attacks cut right to the heart of our fundamental belief in the inherent worth and dignity of each person, of the right of conscience and the values of personal agency that give us all the opportunity to live fully into our whole selves. These issues of censoring education and the targeting of LGBTQIA communities and communities of color are not unrelated. They are intended to divide and make neighbor afraid of neighbor. They coincide with efforts to dismantle democracy, all by pushing authoritarian policies that violate the sanctity of our homes, our bodies, and our diverse religious beliefs. We recognize the forces that are feeding these far-right efforts. Throughout history, we have seen these tactics and ideologies before, and they have always led to destruction and violence. However, Unitarian Universalism teaches a different way. We know that we have to create communities where all feel safe and all belong. Our faith calls us to show up powerfully, both pastorally, providing support and aid to our people and neighbors, and prophetically, with committed organizing and bold moral courage. We are clear and unapologetic. Our LGBTQIA siblings are sacred, whole, and divine. As UUs, we understand that the full expression of the diversity of gender and sexuality is a gift. Our commitment to love and justice, to inclusive ministry and prophetic action is deep and life-affirming. The statement from the UUA goes on to say, our hearts are with everyone in these frontline communities and states. Every day we see a new regressive policy idea being introduced or debated. We pray, especially for all of our trans and non-binary kids and their families and the communities supporting them. Trans and non-binary people are living in an environment where legislators and policymakers are criminalizing their very existence. Trans children and their parents fear that the state will prevent them from receiving appropriate health care or from feeling secure in their families. It's forcing many people to consider relocating for their own safety and that of their families. We know that we need to create safe harbors to continue to educate our children and communities about the full expression of human sexuality and gender. And above all, we must defend our value that all people have the right to be free and thrive. This press release from the UUA concludes by saying, we cannot do it alone. As UUs, we understand that we are part of the interdependent web of all creation. We understand that we belong to each other, and this knowledge fuels our commitment to unwaveringly fight for justice, to unwaveringly fight for each other. As progressive people of faith, as Unitarian Universalists, we affirm and remain in solidarity with trans and non-binary people because this is a fight for everyone's humanity.
This is the time in our service where we share from our abundance. As you know, we continue to donate food items, non-perishable food items to the Standalone Food Pantry. If you've brought any items today or plan to in the future, you may leave on the table. It's at the back of the sanctuary. And a side note that we will, one time a month, send our donations to the Self-Help Food Pantry in Bluffton. And to share our abundance with this community, to do our good works inside and outside, we will now pass the baskets. Thank you all for your generosity. And now we'll hear from Gwenn McClune.
Thank you. So when I was young, I was always a very feminine person. Going to school through the 90s made me a prime target for harassment, as it was the peak of the AIDS epidemic, and that community was being heavily ostracized. Gay slurs and insults were a favorite of the time, and I'm sure many of you recall Rush Limbaugh with his little AIDS counter, where he'd mock and vilify our party morning community for ratings. Needless to say, that thing tends to make its way into our children by the way they speak and think. I received a pretty relentless mockery for being effeminate. Most assumed I was gay and in the closet, and that lasted even through my adulthood. I remember very well being told I was a gay, a faggot, queer, a fairy, and to a degree I actually believed them. I believed that maybe I was subconsciously gay, and then I used to pray and beg God to just make me normal. I wanted to be like everyone else. In retrospect, it's always stuck out to me how when we target a small community, we willingly ignore how much of our own community gets hurt by it. Even presenting as a cisgender male, everyone assumed I was gay when I wasn't, just because I was not like them. At the time, I had no idea really who I was. I kind of existed as a reflection of the expectations placed upon me and the acceptance I worked so hard for, but could never seem to reach. I didn't know why I was different, it just seemed clear that I was, and no one would give me a moment's peace for reminding me of this reality. For everyone else, these small actions meant nothing. They were just an offhand joke, but to me they meant everything. They were all I knew. I was so incredibly ashamed of myself all the time, because nothing I could ever be was ever enough for them, and I thought it was my fault. After I graduated and got married to my first wife, my kid's mom, that harassment faded dramatically. I know people still discussed it behind my back, but they generally kept it out of my face. But there are obviously exceptions. I had a relative who I unfortunately often think about, who used to regularly joke about things like how lucky I was that I met my former wife because no one else could ever have loved me. And something that was an offhand joke to one person kind of felt like cutting at a healing wound to others. Our actions have consequences, and these small ones are often just as important as the large ones. For me, I spent a lot of time accepting who I was through about 10 years of therapy before I wound up moving to South Carolina about 5 years ago. Most of my growth, though, had happened just a few years prior to my move. I had observed that the things that my friends and partners liked about me as a person, were the very things that I was ashamed about. Being more in touch with my emotions and being more feminine was things that were actually appealing to most people around me. But I had so much shame about it that I was afraid to show it. This realization, though, really made a substantial impact in how I saw myself. When my then girlfriend and I moved here about 5 years ago, at the time I still didn't know I was trans, but I had come to finally like the person I was overall. I didn't like being him very much, but I was proud of the way he worked to be a decent guy. He had a lot of good traits and qualities, and honestly, I even had decided he was pretty good looking. But it always felt like I was watching him live my life, and I never felt like I was him. And that's kind of what gender dysphoria feels like. Watching another person live your life for you. It's not really that I was in the wrong body. I was always meant to have this body. But it was the wrong standards that were being forced on me, and the wrong hormones leading to the development of my body in ways that I didn't like. But however, fate seemed to have better plans for me than staying stuck in the passenger seat of my life. In January of 21, something clicked. As it said in my community, my egg cracked. This happens most often when people are at the extremes of who we are. For me, it was actually a pretty high point. But for many, it's often a very low one, which is why support is so incredibly huge. Some people wind up knowing very young, and for others it takes more time. and just kind of incubating, waiting to hatch. I was 36, and I didn't want this at the time, but I was informed enough and close enough to members of the trans community to know that I also wasn't really going to get much of a choice. I had seen what happened to people who chose to remain closeted, and I had seen what happened to people that came out. Ultimately, I decided that I knew I didn't want what would happen if I denied it. So I told my wife, and we just kind of went from there. After involving my wife in what was happening, we just rolled with it as best we could. I decided just to try to completely accept myself, regardless of where that took me. It hasn't been easy, in fact, quite the opposite. But I've never regretted my decision, not even a little. Although I do miss my beard sometimes because it was amazing. I wish I could have passed it along to someone in need of a solid beard. Anyways, something a bit unexpected happened during this time also, and it was kind of a change in my personal beliefs. When one transitions, there's often a lot of built-up trauma from never really fitting in. And it's easy to struggle with loving that part of yourself who you were. Especially because after all, most of our lives we were taught that it was unlovable. But I wanted to, though. I wanted to love him like I'd love any other child that went through what I went through. And when I hear how a friend grew up and is full of their own trauma, I often wish I could go back and hug the crap out of them. And I wanted to feel that way towards me too. And I think about how strong he was and how brave, and how he felt entirely alone, but got up every day anyways. So I kind of lent him my voice. I often find it easier to think when I speak, and so I talk through a lot of my issues with myself out loud. Having these little conversations with myself lets me treat me like I would a friend, and helps me learn to love who I was and who I am. This ended up being a catalyst for shifting my entire mentality though. If I would love my friend with compassion, without judgment, knowing they did the best they could with the knowledge, tools, and resources they had available at the time, and I could learn to love myself, knowing that I did the best with the knowledge, tools, and resources I had at the time, it kind of meant I was responsible for doing it for everyone. I had to understand that everyone is doing the best they can with the knowledge, tools, and resources that they have available. And that helping people be the best versions of themselves means providing them a space where they can safely learn new things, access new tools, get better resources, but with compassion and love and not with judgment. I kind of hate it sometimes because it's hard, but I know it's right. It's why I'm here today. It's why I do this, because I believe that everyone has their own little divinity that is meant to be shared like a light in this world. And it's worth taking small moments to share ours with others, to give our light when someone else feels dark. The whole process has brought a lot more peace and hope to my life. While I may have to be aware of the harsh reality like she was just talking about for people like me, I also feel like it's worth fighting for. As I mentioned though, it's not all been great. The world still sees trans people as sick and in need of a cure. Trans people are routinely referred to as pedophiles and groomers because they are trans. Our country's leaders literally have called me a demon and seek out the elimination of transgenderism, as they say it. The internet is not safe for trans people either. There are very few places to escape harassment and constant dehumanization, even in like my online hobby spaces. They tend to become debates on the validity of who I am because I'm trans, not even because of the topic at hand. We've all seen stories in the news where people are actively threatening violence to the employees of Target because their stores were going to carry one product designed for a body like mine. It's very easy for those voices to become all-consuming in my head, the knowledge that so many wish me harm. And the culture around the topic is so overwhelming that it's hard to stay afloat. These realities eat at me, but thankfully I've been a bit more fortunate in my day-to-day life. People often stare, they give me varying looks of discomfort or confusion, but usually at worst it's no more than just referring to me as a man. But honestly, it's kind of the quiet discrimination that often hurts us the most. Now, the last time I was here, we talked a little about my struggle finding a job. And honestly, if not for my privileges of my wife having a stable job and income, I probably would have lost my medication. I would have lost my home, right? And the additional struggle for finding these things is very difficult. The issue isn't specific to me. It plagues the trans community, with many struggling to stay afloat because they're overlooked for careers that they have already proven to excel in, or by landlords and banks. If the option presents itself, a person who's even a little bit uncomfortable with a trans person will simply select a cisgender person for that job, for that mortgage, for that loan, or for that apartment. I'm always constantly aware that my community is at the highest statistical risk for violence in the country, and it's not a little higher, it's 4 times higher than the next community. However, with all of these things that plague the trans community, one of the hardest things for my wife and I has been a lot more personal. It's her dad. While we're already married, we have not had our actual wedding ceremony yet, and it's planned for this fall. But her dad isn't comfortable walking her down the aisle because of me. Now, I don't think he's a bad person by any means. I'm not angry, I'm just sad. It breaks my heart. She adores him and she adores her family. And she wants him to be happy and to choose to be present for her on a day that meant the world to her, or that means the world to her. I want him to be able to love and support her the way that she wants. He and I don't have to be best friends, but I do wish this wedge didn't have to exist. And my hope is that it can be reconciled through learning to see each other and extending a little grace. I don't want him to miss his daughter's future because he doesn't agree with who I am. But sometimes all you can do is be ready to share your light, and I hope that we can, because all of us deserve it. I love who I am now, and I'm deeply proud of who I've worked to be. I find myself forever grateful to the weird little kid that I was, and his tenacity and ability to improvise when he had no tools. Pride isn't about arrogance and ego. It's just about clearly seeing that who you are is better than you were because you trusted the little bit of divinity that shines some light through our darkest places. It's also knowing that when it gets a little dark again, you need to trust your light and go back, bask in the lights of your friends and families just a little bit. Pride is also a bit of a promise and a bit of a responsibility that we don't hide our light, especially when it seems the hardest to shine. Those who came before me told the world the truth, that LGBT people exist, that we're here, and that we're always supposed to be here. I feel like I have a responsibility to make the world safer for those who come after me, to try to make it a little more accepting, a little more loving, and a little more beautiful. And I think that we all have that responsibility, to bring our best to the world, even when others choose to bring their worst. I have this little belief system that helps me, and it's that I think of how many kind, loving, compassionate, beautiful, small acts made me who I am. The little things, like when someone I barely knew gave me a hug on a hard day, and when I had cancer, and my friends would just come over and help me do the dishes. When a random Walmart employee would give me just the right advice at just the right time. I used to work at Walmart, sorry, I spent a lot of time there. We love this idea of seeing growth in others, but it doesn't often happen all at once, or all on our own. Something like a small act of patience or a little bit of grace on a hard day can change someone's day, and that can change someone's life. But we'll often never see it, and they'll often forget who it was that set that change in motion. I'm okay with that, with never knowing, just knowing that I did what I could. But the other day it was kind of neat. I actually got to see it. I was working with a customer who was very frustrated with the photo surfaces at my job. Nothing really was anyone's fault, but also an understandable feeling. I could tell she was upset, so I gave her a little extra grace. We got through it and got her all fixed up. She got her pictures, and then she started telling me about a family member who was working through some gender stuff and didn't feel safe wearing the clothes they wanted to wear and was just having a hard time overall with it. So I got to share a little of my experience with her and some small advice before we had another customer come up and we had to say our goodbyes. I love these moments, and they are so dear to me, because I could find a couple minutes of grace to give her a hand, not just with her picture, but also with a personal worry. While I love when I get to see these, I also love knowing that often I won't ever get to see the effects of them, but they're just as impactful to the world and the people around us. The reality is I may never ultimately know what happens in that person's situation and with their family member, and I don't know how it will impact them in the long run. But what I do know is that if we don't keep the darkness of the world at bay by providing a little bit of our light, then the world won't be brighter for those who follow us. We don't have to save the world, but we are responsible for trying to make it better.
We are a gentle, angry people. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our life. We are gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our land of many
thank you for the 7 principles, for that deeply meaningful message. Gwen, as you were speaking, it became clear to me that there is packed inside of you a wisdom that we need to know. Thank you for unpacking just a bit of it today, and we look forward to hearing more from you. Ashley and Sam, thank you for accompanying her here today and for the things that we may be able to do together. I want to brag on someone for just a moment. There are people that do things because they're skilled in them, and then they volunteer to assist. And then there are those courageous people that don't know what they're doing, and they volunteer anyway. Kathy Zeisser is that person.
I'm like, oh, that's me. I had no idea.
So, Team Aquarius set up on the wrong side of the road, had to take 65 full cups of water to the other side of the road within 3 minutes of the gun going off so that we could have water when we got there. And we did it, and it was fabulous, and it never slowed her down 1 minute. I appreciate it. Valerie, you'll be missed. May your journey be sweet and swift. Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here, and those names that need to be called out. David, thank you for your work. John, as always. And I pray we might be able to continue to draw ourselves closer together. Gwen, if you would, please.
As James Goodall said, you cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference to make. Remember the small deeds that made you who you are today, many of them from people you'll never really remember very well. And we have the ability to be that for others, to lift people out of their own shame, their own struggles, by showing them what we need and believing in their worth, sometimes even when they make it hard. Please stay after for the talk back time. My wife and I are both going to be here and to answer any of y'all's questions. Any question is an okay question. I'm not going to judge you for not knowing something. Thank you.
Join me in extinguishing the chalice. The words are in your order of service, and please stand. While we extinguish this flame, we still carry in our hearts the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment, until we are together again.
Go.